Hey, what's up everybody? We are back at the shop for another Mustang makeover. I'm gonna call it a Mustang makeover. This is a 1995 Mustang GT. This one actually is from Michigan. The owner of this one bought this car a while back, I think last year or sometime. He bought it from Florida. So the car itself is in great shape. It's a Southern car, no rust whatsoever. Unfortunately, whoever, I don't know if it was the previous owner or before him or whatever, they hacked this thing up. Just put it to you like that. And when he bought the car, he drove from Michigan all the way down to Florida. And of course, it's the same situation where, you know, you get there and it's not exactly as it's supposed to be. Well, after he made that long trip and spent $400 in fuel, and that was then and not now with the way the fuel prices are, he really, at that point, he was already in, man. He had to go ahead and get the car, especially since it was in great shape. So the deal with this is, it supposedly has a built motor. We're not really sure. 302 base motor. It's got can-filled heads. It had a Pro Charger on it. No power steering, no heater, no AC, nothing. Somebody was turning it into a race car, basically. So it was a mess, a total mess. So everything on it was super old. I mean, everything. It was a super old build. We're not really sure if the motor has, you know, good internals in it. I did bore scope it, and the pistons are flat top 4-valve relief pistons. You know, which is really, you know, typically they're cheap pistons if they're 4-valve relief. You know, they could be forged. Not really sure if it's got good rods, crank, whatever. It does have a 7-quart oil pan on it. It's got GT40 intake. Well, it's a Cobra intake. And it's a 94, 95 style upper intake. It's got, all it has was just an alternator. But man, the wiring on this thing was so bad, it was a fire hazard. I mean, it was not good at all. Everything on it was just super hacked up. The battery that was in the back wasn't even secured down. The battery cables were basically welding cables that somebody made, you know, for a relocation kit. They had it going through the floorboard. They had it going through areas and didn't even have any protection. The hole was the same size as the cable. It was already starting to rub through. So there was no rubber protection between, you know, the hole and the cable, which is very dangerous. The fuel pump in the back the wiring was just a nightmare. It had a new MSD box. I guess the other owner, something happened to the MSD box that was in it. He bought a new one, had it inside above the glove box, and it was just zip tied there, and the wiring was a mess. So I went ahead and removed all it. I removed that, and I've already cleaned this thing up. Like it looks so much better right now. Got all the wiring mess out of there. So what we're going to do on this car, the most affordable way to get this car right and looking really nice, he just wants a good car that's going to run good, it's going to drive good, take it to shows, cruise-ins and all that. We're converting it to carburetor. We're going to put a carburetor on it, intake. I mean, I already got the stuff over here, and I'll show you a clip of that now. So as you can see, we've got some pretty nice stuff going on. So, I mean, it's gonna look really nice, man. So as I'm doing this makeover or this build, we're going to be showing you on the video how it's coming along. So let me just kind of show you right now what we got going on in here. So before, they had this, as you can see, the cap on this thing is broken. They just kind of glued another piece on here, and it got damaged. So we're gonna put another cap on it. But anyway, they had this mounted over here because of the supercharger inlet. So I relocated it, put it back in a stock location, kind of cleaned up a lot of the wiring. This side here was just a total mess. I got all the wiring cleaned up on this side already. So I still got to pull the intake off. They have a number 10 feed and an 8 return. This regulator is not going to work for a carburetor. It's a high pressure, so we're getting rid of that. Got to get rid of the return line. Like I say, we're going with carburetor setup, and I'm going to have this feed coming through here. I got a bulkhead fitting I want to put right here, and then I'll have to end up cutting this shorter. These are reusable ends, and I'll have this on the inside of the fender well, and then from the bulkhead fitting, it's going to be a number 10 that's going to come in to the carburetor, and then the regulator is going to also be mounted on the carburetor, and then the return is going to go back and tap into the return line, which is underneath there. So that'll be a nice clean look. And but yeah, we'll get to that once we start getting this thing going. I'll be pulling this intake off here today and getting the rest of that kind of cleaned up. They even, as you can see here, they even have this, they have a fuel pressure gauge in the car, and they ran a braided line into the fuel pressure gauge. Yeah, I mean, that's not the smartest thing to do. It is a braided line, which most likely won't leak, but what if the gauge starts leaking or whatever? This thing had, you know, it's got probably, I think it was somewhere around 50 pounds of fuel pressure. So you can imagine if something happened inside that cab and you got 50 pounds of fuel pressure spraying everywhere. That's not good. You never want to put a fuel pressure gauge in the car unless it's electric, period. You know, that's just the kind of stuff we're dealing with here. The oil pressure gauge is the same thing. It's got a braided stainless steel line that's going to the oil pressure gauge. Well, this thing could have, what, 60 pounds, 70 pounds of oil pressure, wide open throttle. What if the gauge blew, sprayed oil everywhere? That's another hazard, right? Not going to be as dangerous as gas, but still, hot oil is not a good thing. So, but yeah, so it's going to look so nice when we're done. I mean, it's going to look sweet. I've already started on the back here. Let me show you. The back, the trunk was just really a disaster here. So I went ahead and straightened all this up. The wiring that actually activates the fuel pump was just running across the floor. They had a relay here, but the wiring was just a mess. All the connectors, a lot of the connectors wasn't even secured very well at all. So I went ahead and put everything in wire loom up there, got it attached real nice. Comes along there, comes along here, and then I've got the relay mounted right here, and then those are the two wires that comes from the fuel pump, and I've got a nice rubber grommet there, and basically I already got everything ready to attach to the battery. You know, this here is going to come from the switch up on the dash. It's got to power the pump. It'll have a 15 amp fuse in it, and then this one here is coming from the relay. It'll have a 30 amp fuse. That's what's going to be actually powering up the relay, or yeah, it'll power up the relay. The relay is going to power up the fuel pump. And then the cap here is broken, so I went ahead and just taped it off to kind of keep the fumes out. This actually is a vent, and they just had a 6AN line running down out of the floorboard here, and I had to cap it off because the fumes were killing me. This is the return, and I got to secure it down below. It's just kind of dangling. And then underneath, though, it actually has it's got some expensive parts on it. I think whoever built this car back in the day, they spent some money on it. So it's got, and I don't think this was the original motor. I think it definitely had a different motor in it by whoever built the car, because you know, they ran, the pump on this thing is very expensive. It's old. It's basically a 12 feed out of the bottom of the fuel cell, goes right into the pump. Well, I take that back. It goes into a 100 micron filter, and then it goes through the pump, and then out of the pump, it's like a 40 micron filter, and then it turns into a 10 feed, 10 all the way to the front. So the pump will support like 1,500 horsepower. I mean, it's a very expensive pump. I looked it up. Even though it looks pretty old, it still works fine. And that pump also will work with a carbureted setup. So that's why all I had to do was change the fuel pressure regulator, you know, for a lower setting for the carburetor. So that's cool. I'm gonna pull the filters out and see what they look like. You know, may have to change the filters. They are, you know, the cartridges inside the filters are replaceable, so that's cool. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at on this deal now. That's why I got all this stuff laid out. I've been doing the wiring and everything. The only thing I got left to do is I got to run the positive cable to the front. So I've already kind of got a game plan for that. And then once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and get that intake off and start, you know, getting it all cleaned up and start and get the intake on. So yeah, it's gonna look really nice. I mean, it's gonna be night and day, man. We got different valve covers and the whole deal, as you can see with the little clip I showed you of the parts going on. So now I'm gonna show you a clip of the parts that came off of it. So as you can see, they're pretty old stuff, pretty dirty. A lot of that stuff will clean up really nice. So the supercharger kit's gonna be for sale. It's a complete kit. The intercooler, actually, I still got to pull it out. The intercooler's right here. It's got a nice and big ProCharger intercooler on it. I'll be pulling that out here today too. The Cobra intake is going to be for sale. It's got a 75mm throttle body on it. That can either go with it, or he may sell it separately. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much going to try to sell all that stuff. It's got a billet distributor for SN95. That's going to be for sale. We're not going to use it. We can't use it because we're going with, you know, another MSD distributor that's going to plug right into the MSD box. So the MSD box, I want to actually mount it right here. It's going to be mounted right on the side, right here. I've got some rubber isolators on order because I really don't want to mount it solid. When you buy them MSD boxes, they come with the rubber mounts. Keeps the vibration down so they last a long time. It just helps them, you know, if you get a lot of vibration, if you mount them solid, you may get a lot of vibration and it can cause premature damage to them. So I'm waiting on them to come in. But yeah, so we're going to do that. We've got a new coil. We're going to mount, I'll probably end up mounting the coil right over here somewhere. We'll see. Yeah, like I say, so his billet distributor will be for sale. I've kind of got everything boxed up over here already. You see, this is, yeah, there's a distributor right there. And yeah, it is an MSD distributor Pro Billet, so that's a pretty expensive distributor. Just get it back in here, nice and easy. So yeah, it's good to have pretty much the full kit. You know, you've seen these in that other clip. That fan's just, it's junk. It's got to go in the trash. That thing is making so much noise and drawing so many amps. It was trying to pop the fuse. The wires were getting melted. This was the old battery box, which is, you know, it's kind of, they've got it all hacked up with a bunch of holes in it. It wasn't even secure. So since the trunk is actually sealed, we're not going to really need a sealed battery box. So this came in the kit, you know, with the relocation kit that I got. So we're going to use that. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on this thing. Hey, what's up? So I'm back at the shop a couple days later. So story is on, it's kind of a bummer. The silver SN95, as you can see, it's not on the lift now. I've got another one. It's a 95 Cobra. Anyway, be sure, I'm going to actually do a video on this one too. Be sure to check that out. It'll come out after this video. So unfortunately, on the silver one, as you all know, we were going to do a nice little makeover on this one. You know, change the intake, put a carburetor on it, do the whole deal. So I go to take the intake off, and I noticed the intake gaskets are on upside down. Then the rocker arms, pull the valve covers off. Some of the rocker arms are on wrong. So on the pedestal, or I should say on the poly locks that you screw down to adjust the roller rockers, you have a flat side of the roller rocker, and then you have the round side. The round side faces down towards the head when it slips over the screwed in stud. The flat side, you know, goes up. The poly locks are flat on the bottom, they screw down. Anyway, almost half of them were on upside down. So whoever got, you know, started working on this motor had no clue what they were doing. So obviously we kind of know the history of the car. That's why we were doing what we were doing, because the harness was totally cheap. Everything on the car was just done incorrectly. Mismatched parts, mismatched bolts. There was some wiring that had, the wiring wasn't even no more than probably 5 or 6 feet long, and had 2 or 3 different pieces of wire spliced together, instead of going and buying a roll of wire and doing it all the right way. This is the kind of stuff that was done to this car. It really aggravates me when I see this. I know guys want to, you know, have a nice car or whatever. That's not the way to do it. It's I talk to other guys in this business, and they see it all the time. 80% of my jobs that come in here is cars that are nice cars, or they were at one time. Customer buys the car, and now it's going to cost them a fortune to get it done right, unless they could do it themselves, which, you know, they are smart enough to realize that they're not going to be able to do it. Even though they can work on the car, they may not be able to do it themselves and make it 100% right like they want it. So when you have guys that get on these cars and they just hack them up, man, they destroy them. It's really a shame. So getting back with the car, I'm just rambling on. It aggravates me. So once I've seen that and all the other issues that was going on with this car, about an hour and a half I could have the heads off, because the heads were totally reconditioned. Machine shop redid the heads, you could tell. So I was afraid of, you know, the same person that owned the car before, or whoever worked on it, put the heads on, which they probably did because they did everything else to it. And a lot of you guys may know or may not know, a small block Ford head gaskets, there's not a left and a right, but there is front and back. You have to put the head you have to put the head gaskets on correctly. There's a front and there's a back. If you put them on wrong, it'll overheat. So, you know, I told the customer, I'm like, look, it's going to take about an hour and a half to get these heads off. Let's just check, you know. Sure enough, I pulled the heads off. Passenger side head gaskets on backwards. Driver side was on correctly. Probably, you know, like I say, whoever worked on it probably didn't even know that. So then the worst part was, now we could see what the cylinder walls look like. And let me tell you, it looked like this was definitely, the guy lied to him about the motor. He says he built, you know, parts in the motor. It was a stock motor. It was 30 over, flat top, 4-valve relief, stock replacement pistons. It had, you know, Canfield heads, 202 valves. It had 1.7 roller rockers, which is cool, right? Well, you can't put a 202 valve head on a flat top 4-valve relief pistons on a small block Ford. Even with a stock cam, the piston to valve clearance will be too close. May not hit, but it's too close. When you start running these things hard, they will heat up and tap. Well, that tells us that it had a stock cam in it, because there was about 4 or 5 intake valves that were just kissing the piston. That wasn't even the worst part. The cylinder walls on this thing were absolutely, this motor must have set without the cylinder heads on, we're thinking. Because it looked like there was some old rust on these cylinder walls. It was very stained, distorted. There was some pits in the cylinder walls. And, you know, whoever, they must have just bought this motor from somebody used without heads. We have no idea what happened, but why put a set of cylinder heads that you just spent a bunch of money on, getting them reconditioned, on a short block like that? Unless he was just wanting to throw it together and get it running to sell the car. That's kind of what we're thinking happened. So the motor needs to be rebuilt. It's already 30 over. 40 over wasn't going to clean it up. Maybe, maybe not. You can't really get a 50 over piston. Maybe you can if we special, you know, custom make. We can get a 60 over piston. So I gave him a price on rebuilding the motor, 60 over, putting a good set of flat top 2-valve relief pistons in it, throwing one of our spec cams in there. It would have been a perfect combination with those heads, the intake, carburetor, and everything else we was going to do. It would have made over 400 horsepower. We was going to take it to about 10.5 to 1 compression. It would have been a nice build. But unfortunately, with the money he already had in the car, all the, you know, the parts, my labor, he just could not afford to rebuild the bottom end of this thing at this time. So unfortunately, you know, what I ended up doing, I sent all the parts back to my supplier. I'm waiting on that money to be deposited in my account, minus shipping and stuff. And then he'll get his money back for the parts. And of course I had to charge him for my labor that I've done so far on the car. So he came and got the car. Very next day he took it back. You know, everything's cool. If he decides, you know, to get another motor or a short block or whatever, you know, it's gonna be a nice car. I mean, the car itself is in great shape. It really is. So, you know, it is what it is. It's unfortunate because I was looking forward to putting this thing together, you know, but we would have been disappointed, you know, even if the cylinder walls were not in that shape, because it had a stock cam in it. There's absolutely no way it had any type of a camshaft in it. I didn't really check. I could have probably checked with a dial indicator to see what lift it was and all that with the lifter in there, but there was no sense in spending more money, or I mean, there was no sense in spending more time on it. So anyway, with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video off now. And you know, I didn't mean to go on and rant and rave about it, but it's just aggravating, man, to see this kind of stuff. If you know, if there's anybody out there that does not have 100% knowledge on stuff, if you can work on cars or something, you know, if you can work on them, but you don't really know about the thing, dude, it's out there on the internet. Just Google it, you know. Don't just jump into something. There's a lot of guys out there that really, they're not really mechanics, but they're mechanically inclined, and they do great work. I've seen some work that's amazing. You think that they were professional shops doing this stuff. It's because they do their homework. They look it up, man, on Google. You can find anything out. But you know, when you just, that's why we think the guy was just he was kind of in a hurry. He needed money, and he just threw it together real quick just to sell the car, which screws the guy buying the car. You know, that's the bad part. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off here. I appreciate you guys checking this video out. This is just gonna be kind of a short video I'm gonna do on this car. This one actually has one of our motors in it that we rebuilt last year, and it came back today. We just switched transmission. It needed a transmission. He bought this car, and this one was another situation where, you know, it was hacked up. We ended up having to rebuild the motor, but it came out really nice. He's got a nice motor in this thing. His transmission was grinding when he bought it. He bought a world-class T5 from LMR. They had a sale on or whatever, you know. So he bought the transmission, brought it to us. I went ahead and switched it out for him. I'm changing oil in it because it's about due for an oil change now. And that's it. I'll do a video on this one so you guys check it out when it comes out. All right, I appreciate you guys for sure. Please like, subscribe, share these videos. We'll catch you on the next video.